Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. We're so happy that you were able to be here, and I think you're going to have a great time today. But before we get started, let me ask a question. What is your purpose? Why are you here? I dare say a lot of us have asked that question of our lives, and some of us have a good answer, but I'm afraid that probably a lot of us still are asking the question and don't know the answer to it. Well, today's your lucky day. Our presenter is going to give you some tools and some advice and some thoughts on how you can start the process of answering that question for yourself. I know that he has asked the question of himself and he's answered it, and I know that he knows his purpose in life. Since 2007, he has led Cook Children's Healthcare System in Fort Worth, Texas, as our president and CEO, and he's had a major impact on children around the nation as the chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Children's Hospital Association. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Rick Merrill.
For a moment, let me take you back to your childhood. What were your dreams? Your aspirations? Did you dream that one day you would become an astronaut or a professional ballerina, a doctor who cures cancer, or even a superhero who saves the world? Maybe even you wanted to be a professional baseball player. By the way, this is the closest I got to that aspiration. So, fast forward to adulthood. With all that hopefulness in our youth, why do 40 million adults in the U.S. suffer from anxiety disorders? Or why do 9 million Americans use prescription sleeping pills? Why do 27% of adults in the U.S. experience some sort of mental health disorder, be it mood disorders, anxiety disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or even substance abuse? And if that's not enough, look at the impact social media is having on us and our kids. Social media has created a new sense of impulsivity and urgency, leading to a feeling of being overwhelmed, fatigued, sleeplessness, and even a sense of unworthiness. Where did our aspirational dreams go? How did we get from those early years filled with hope and anticipation to the present day filled with anxiety and depression? And when we put our head on the pillow at night, we are totally exhausted. It's death by 1,000 cuts. By the way, not to dogpile, but as parents, we are instructed to train up a child in the way that they should go. Translate, we actually are supposed to help our children find their bent, their unique purpose in life. And you thought you were depressed before. I believe that what is missing in so many people's lives today is a deep sense of purpose. Innate in all of us is a deep need, a craving to find purpose in our lives. I believe every person is born with a unique purpose. Finding our unique purpose is the key to fulfillment in our lives. But if that's so, why have so many people missed the boat? We're like that person who said, someday my ship will come in, and with my luck, I'll be at the airport. But let's be clear. We're talking about fulfillment and not happiness. And there's a big difference between the two. Webster defines fulfillment as a sense of well-being arising from within, the achievement of a dream, accomplishing one's hopes. Think about that definition for a moment, rising from within. That means your sense of well-being arises from within, but often with outside influence. Our parents helped nurture our souls. We nurtured the souls of our children and of the people we work with and of the patients and families we serve. You know, my life has been blessed with several mentors over the years. I've had a few tour mentors, but that's another story. Those mentors helped me discover my own passion and purpose. And so through the years, I've had a number of people come to me asking for my help and guidance so that they can find their passion and purpose. I'm honored to share with them some of the wisdom that I have gained from my mentors over the years. So when I agree to meet with them, usually sit down over a cup of coffee, and I ask them 3 really important questions, but there's a catch. The first is I make them promise that they will not answer the questions for 90 days. And for those 90 days, I ask them to spend 20 minutes a day in a quiet place pondering the answer to these questions. So here's the first question. If you had all the time, all the money you needed, and you were guaranteed to succeed, what would you do? Think about that a moment. You had all the time in the world. 1 year, 20 years, 100 years. Money was no object. All the money you needed was at your disposal. And then you were absolutely guaranteed to succeed no matter what. What would you do? So here's the second question. What do you want your epitaph to read? The epitaph is the dash between the day you were born and the day you die. Epitaphs can be very telling about the way we lived our lives. Here are just some examples. I think this gentleman was trying to say something to the people that he lived with. And then there's a comedian in every cemetery, Rodney Dangerfield. There goes the neighborhood. This one is a little more serious. He was remarkably simple, but simply remarkable. And I really like this one. I think this says a lot about this gentleman. This man lived. Okay? So the third question, what makes you cry? I know a person who actually cries at supermarket openings. It's not the kind of tears I'm talking about, nor is it the kind of tears you get from cutting up onions or being frightened to death by watching a movie, Night of the Living Dead or some other horror movie. The tears, no, I'm talking about are matters of the heart. Tears that bring happiness, heartache, or even something that stirs the emotion like an injustice. I can remember sitting down with a Trinity healthcare student who was trying to decide if they wanted to go into adult healthcare or pediatric healthcare. And we were sitting down visiting it, and she looked at me and she said, Mr. Merrill, I don't think I could go into pediatrics because it makes me cry. And I told her, I said, maybe you ought to think about that a little differently. Instead of running from pediatrics, maybe your tears are telling you ought to run to pediatrics. And then I remember at a point in my life where I was getting ready to make a decision to potentially leave adult health care and move into children's health care. And I was on that cusp of making that decision, trying to decide if it was the right move for me. Happened to be with the family down at Disney World, and we were sitting on the curb on Main Street waiting for the main parade to come through. Right across the street from me was this special needs child in this wheelchair with his parents. And I was captivated by this child. I could not take my eyes off of this child and the family and their interaction and love for this child, the emotions on this child's face as the parade began to move past us was almost overwhelming to me. I think when Cinderella got down off of her float and went over to this child and hugged the child, that sealed the deal for me. And I realized that pediatrics, children's health care, was what I needed to move to. So after we finish those 3 questions and discuss those, we do a little exercise. So I asked them to get out a piece of paper. And on the left of this piece of paper, down the column, I have them write, here is where whatever their name is. In this case, here's where Rick is. And then below that, here's where Rick wants to be. And then below that, this is what Rick needs to do to get there. And then I asked them to fill out any area of their life that's important to them. I can't tell them what it is. They have to tell me. It could be 100 areas. It could be 2 areas. It could be 1 area. So things like, what about emotion or physical, occupational, geographical, spiritual? Whatever those areas of importance, those are written across the top. And as the individuals spend 90 days contemplating those 3 questions, I asked them to really think about completing this chart and thinking about the answer to all of these in their life. And what they start to discover is that when completing this, it starts to give them a context for decision making in their lives. So think about it this way. Let's say physical, Rick is 400 pounds. So Rick needs to lose 200 pounds so he can be healthier. Well, what does he need to do to get there? He needs to start eating better, and he also needs to start exercising. So I start working this focus in my life, this context for decision making, and about 2 months later, a high school buddy of mine calls me. He says, Rick, you're not going to believe this, but I've been working at Bluebell for the last 10 years. I just got promoted to senior vice president, and I'm looking for a vice president of ice cream tasting. So all you have to do is sit at the end of the line and taste ice cream all day long to make sure it passes the quality. And here's a perk. You actually get to take home all of the ice cream that you want at the end of the day. What do you think? It's not going to get me where I need to go. So finding our purpose and passion with context for decision making allows us to focus on the essential few and eliminate the trivial more. And at the end of the day, we will be met not with exhaustion and death by 1,000 cuts, but really we're tired, but it will be a sigh of that I did something meaningful that day. In his book, The Friendship Factor, Alan Lloyd McGinnis tells the story of an obscure landscape gardener who died a number of years ago. Hubert Bells was no astronaut. He was no doctor, nor was he a superhero. He was a simple gardener. He was one of the shyest people that you would ever meet. When he talked, he squirmed, blinked his eyes rapidly, and smiled nervously. Hubert never ran in influential circles. He grew shrubs and trees, working with his hands on the plot of land left to him by his father. Yet, when Hubert died, his funeral was one of the largest in the history of this small town. There were so many people that filled the church that they actually spilled out the front door. Why did such a shy man win the hearts of so many people? You see, I believe Hubert had found his unique purpose in life. His purpose showed him how to care for people, and for 60 years he put people first. They recognized the extra effort it took for him to overcome his shyness so that he could serve others. His generosity of spirit won their hearts, and the townspeople loved him back by the hundreds. Hubert had a profound impact on his entire community. So it doesn't matter what you do as long as you are following your purpose and your passion. Come to think of it, Hubert was a superhero. I am privileged to be surrounded by over 7,000 superheroes, people who have found purpose and passion, all of us working together to fulfill our promise and have a profound impact on the children we serve every day. Thank you.
Wow. Boy. Rick, what a powerful and profound topic, the purpose and passion. It is so much that we want to do that. We want to be able to live in our purpose and our passion. But one of the greatest leadership, I want you to tell me what one of the greatest leadership truths or epiphanies that you have discovered in your career.
Yeah, I think a few, actually. I'd give you two. Mm-hmm. The first one you probably aren't going to see in many textbooks at all, and that is, as human beings, we are multidimensional. And what that means is that we learn, we process, we respond, we react to our environment on three different levels. The first is the logic. 2 + 2 = 4, 4 + 4 = 8, unless you're an Aggie. Sorry, that was for Jim Cunningham, wherever he is. Probably not in the audience. But it's really just pretty straightforward. It's just the logic of it, and there's really not a lot of emotion in it. But the second one is the emotion. Now, the emotion is important, but it also can be overbearing. It's usually out front, almost screaming at us at times, and oftentimes it's trying to get us to say things or do things that are not necessarily in our best interest, right? Got to keep it in check. And then there's the heart, and that is quiet. It's unassuming, but it is way out in front of the emotion and the logic. So How many times have you in your life said, I don't, for a big decision, I don't know why I need to do this, but my heart is telling me I need to do this. And you do it, but then 6 months or a year later, you see the reason and the wisdom of making that decision. Well, that was your heart jumping way out in front of you, telling you where the right decision, the best decision is made. And the heart is where our best decisions are made. The key is to be able to tune into it and to hear the frequency of our heart and be willing to hear it and act on it. The second is perspective. And I say, we all live in a complex world, and our jobs are difficult, our work is difficult, our families create challenges for us. And keeping the right perspective for us in our personal lives and our professional lives is really important. So let's say, for example, that you go to the doctor, you've been with this doctor for a number of years, and he or she knows you well, and you're getting your annual checkup, and the doctor comes in and shakes his head, has his head down, and goes, Rick, I don't know how to tell you this, but you have terminal cancer, and you're going to be dead 6 months from now. Well, what do? You start getting your affairs in order. You have to work through the emotion of it, and you decide how you want to live the last 6 months of your life. It changes your life, obviously. But 2 weeks later, you're sitting down at your desk and listening to the radio, and you hear that emergency broadcast system buzz that goes out there, and it says, this is not a test. There is a meteor that they have not ever discovered before now heading for Earth, and it will be here in a week, and it is so large that it'll wipe out the entire Earth and mankind, guaranteed. How do you feel about your cancer?
Yeah.
It's irrelevant. But that is perspective that we can bring to ourselves throughout all of our challenges in life that I think really matters.
I love that heart part. I like that because it makes me think if you're a spiritual person, it's almost like Holy Spirit, speak to me, and it's very quiet, like you said, and I'm assuming I like that very much. I know that there are a lot of parents who are probably listening to this thinking, I need to know my own unique passion and purpose, but because they are parents, they're charged with training up a child in the way they should go. And as you say, no pressure here. I mean, so now you've got to not only learn what your purpose and passion is, but you've got to help your child find their own way as well. Help us, tell me how we can help and begin helping our children in that process.
Well, I think spending time with your children is probably the most important thing that you could do. Interacting with your child, reading to them, understanding what books are important to them, what stories are important to them, why they're important to them. That starts to give you ideas about where their interests lie. Asking questions. Learning, do they like sports? Do they like books? Those are the kinds of things that are just so important, and you can't get that unless you really spend a lot of time with your children. There are some great tools that are out there as well. You actually can take online free a Myers-Briggs test as a parent for your children. There's one of the 4 traits that doesn't express itself until later on in life, but even the 3 traits can give you some great insight into the personality of your child. And then a great supplement to that is a book called Please Understand Me and Please Understand Me Too, which really goes into depth the personality traits and what types of careers people in those personalities find themselves in, successful, how the different personalities respond to different issues in life. So that can be, I think, a very powerful tool for you as you think about your child's bent. And then also there's some fairly expensive, but very helpful aptitude and skills testing that's available as well. And that's usually what you give your child later on as teenagers. And it really starts to help your child understand what their aptitudes and what their skills are. And then, encouraging your children to ask great questions is important. As parents, we tend to always be willing to answer the how-to question. How come this, Dad? How come that, Mom? And when they start asking the more difficult question of why, we almost tend to get put off and, I'll answer that later. It's
Yeah,
time to go to
yeah.
bed, son, you know.
Yeah.
But I would say that encourage your children to ask why. Why is the most powerful question you can ask because it gets to motive. And so those are, I think, tools that could be used to at least help give you an understanding of what your child's bent or potential purpose and passion is in life.
Right. Okay. Very good. You talked about mentors and tormentors. Who are your mentors? Who are the people that really
Yeah.
gave you what you needed so that you could become president and CEO of
Yeah.
Cook Children's?
Well, my parents were clear mentors in my life. And just, the sermons we see, poem, just watching them, their demeanor, how they responded to different challenges in our family's lives and even in my dad's professional life. My mom was a stay-at-home mom with 5 kids. I think she probably worked harder than my dad. That's how that works sometimes. But just looking at their work ethic and their life-work balance and how they went about that, I think was an incredible role model for me. Believe it or not, my dad was the one when I was home my freshman year from college who said, have you ever thought about healthcare administration? So it was simply his question that somehow he had connected that dot, and that's how I started my journey toward healthcare. There was a friend that I'd known early in my career who brought many of these principles that I've brought before you today. He was actually a consultant for a number of years for businesses, a very successful one, actually. And we sat down many an evening going over some of these questions and pondering these questions. And so that, I think, gave me a good base as well to start working from.
I think we all work hard. And we sometimes get on that work treadmill where we're just working, and we lose track and lose focus. And sometimes we're working so hard we get burnout. How do we handle dealing with the burnout and dealing with difficult times when we're having to do it?
Even if you're at the center of your purpose and passion and you're making great decisions in life within context, you're going to come up on some difficult times. That's life. And that's the reality. That's not a bad thing, though. I will tell you that the most important and growing times in my life have been the difficult times.
Yeah.
Not easy,
Yeah.
but that's where I've learned and grown the most. Burnout is real, too. And I think that sitting down quietly and contemplating where you are, asking great questions, including why, and also getting to the heart and understanding what's going on can be very powerful and helpful in working through that. I also believe that if we look around enough, there are gifts out there for us during those difficult times. Sometimes they fall on our lap. Sometimes you have to look for them. So I was at a point in my mid-career for me, where I was burned out and was working really long hours. I was tired. And I was asking the question, am I making the kind of difference in healthcare that I thought I was going to make when I first got into this line of work? And I was on the cusp of making an important decision about whether or not to jump to something else outside of healthcare. And I came into work one morning, and the executive assistant called me and said, there's a patient here who wants to thank you. And of course, I kind of said, I don't take care of patients, so something's not right here.
Yeah.
Against my better judgment, I said, send him in. So Aman from the Ivory Coast came in to my office, and he had his head down, bowed the whole time. He would not look me in the eye. He stuck his hand out and he said, my name is Aman. I'm from the Ivory Coast, and I want to thank you. And I said, well, Aman, I don't know what I've done to deserve your thanks, but sit down and tell me your story. So we sat down at the table, and he began to tell me a story. So he pulled out these 2 Polaroid pictures of a grossly deformed face, but yet he had this normal-looking face. And come to find out, we had made a policy at this hospital that we would allow the craniofacial surgeons to do 12 free cases a year. They could pick any case they wanted, and if they could get the patient there, we would do the case free. Well, Aman happened to be one of those 12 cases. And his self-esteem was so low that he could not look me in the eye. In his country, his parents had abandoned him, and with his deformity, he could not get work anywhere, and he was living with an uncle who was abusing him. And so through a series of miracles, he got to this hospital, and we performed the surgery. And so he was there recovering over a few weeks period, got to know him a little more. My wife and I invited him to church with us one Sunday morning. We took him to IHOP, and he ate 15 pancakes. He had never had pancakes before in his life, and I think it's safe to say that Amon liked pancakes. As he was leaving toward the end of his recovery, we got to say our goodbyes. I wished him all the best, and about 3 months later, he sent me a nice letter thanking me again, but telling me that he had gotten a job, of all things, interpreting the Bible in his native language. And in this envelope were these 2 little wooden carved elephants. And I put these wooden elephants on the back of my credenza, and it reminds me every day of why I got into this business to begin with, and that I can make a difference even in administration. And so I think looking for gifts, sometimes you have to look for them. Sometimes they fall on your lap, but they are out there as well. Taking time to reflect, quiet time, is so important when you're in those difficult situations. Having your time to really think through and hear the heart and what the heart is telling you. And then the last thing I would say is it takes courage. And I know everyone that works here at Cook Children's gets courage. But courage is usually not the loud roar of the lion that we think about. More often than not, it's that quiet voice at the end of the day that says, I'll try again tomorrow.
Yeah, that's good. So this last question is a tough one, I think. So let's get to it. What do you want your epitaph, that dash between born and death, what does it say for you?
Well, obviously I've thought about this, and so the epitaph that's important to me, or that I would like to have read, is "He made a difference."
Wow, that's deep. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your advice, your words, the tools. It's so much that we can use. Thank you so much.
Thank you.